And let's start there. The president tweeting about those Iran sanctions that snapped back into place after the president tore up that Iran nuclear deal. The Iranians have said they'll be at least following the terms of that deal for the time being, but the United States now reimposing sanctions on Iran. Here's the president's tweet from just a few moments ago. The president, as you say, awake and tweeting. He says, the Iran sanctions have officially been cast. These are the most biting sanctions ever imposed. And in November, they ratchet up to yet another level. Anyone doing business with Iran will not be doing business with the United States. I am asking for world peace, nothing less. Take a look at some of the details here on those Iran sanctions, and you see exactly the sectors here that are impacted by these new sanctions. The president putting in place a couple of sanctions here that are going to impact automotive sector and some others. Now, those are the result of the U.S. canceling that Iran deal. The civil aviation sector affected, gold and other metals also affected. The White House says it wants enormous change from Iran in a host of Iran's behaviors in the region, not just on the nuclear front. They want broad change from Iran. That puts the EU in a difficult position. Some of the EU foreign ministers and other countries have said that they deeply regret the U.S. decision, and that puts European companies in a difficult position. A number of them have said that for now they will be going along with the United States sanctions because they'd prefer to have access to that enormous United States market rather than the relatively small Iranian market, but some diplomatic feathers being ruffled there as well. And then, guys, some dramatic testimony at the courthouse yesterday in the case involving Paul Manafort. That's the president's former campaign manager. His top aide, Rick Gates, was in court yesterday testifying about his role in what he said were crimes that the two men committed in the years before they got involved with the Donald Trump presidential campaign. Rick Gates on the stand yesterday, clean shaven, shaved off his regular beard. He said that he did not report a number of foreign offshore bank accounts at Manafort's direction. He said he lied to Manafort's accountants by not reporting income or accounts. He submitted false expense reports, and he said he embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from Manafort himself. So Rick Gates testifying that he was committing crimes with Paul Manafort, but also that he was stealing from Paul Manafort at the same time and not being honest with him. You can expect that Paul Manafort's lawyers will make a lot out of that, say that Rick Gates' testimony is not to be believed because he has lied and he did commit these crimes. Now, ultimately, the White House will point out that all of these alleged crimes took place in the years before both Gates and Manafort joined the Trump campaign. They say it has nothing to do with the Trump campaign and nothing to do with anything involving the Russians, guys. So we'll see where that one goes as well. A lot at stake here for the White House.
Hey, man, lots of topics. I want to add one more to it. It's really a story that's emerged over the last 48 hours, but I think is going to continue to linger throughout this week, if not much longer, which is what's going on between Canada and Saudi Arabia, and where does the U.S. stand in all of this? And the story I'm referring to is the ambassador getting kicked out of, so the Canadian ambassador getting kicked out of Saudi Arabia. There's been a tit-for-tat back and forth on both Twitter and in the press between the Saudis and Canada. But the reason I ask about where the U.S. is, we've always been allies to both. And the question is, given that our relationship was frayed with Canada, is that giving license to Saudi to be more aggressive?
Yeah, it could be a ripple effect when you see the United States relationship with Canada fraying as it has ever since the president was in Canada for the G7. The president and his relationship with the Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, that relationship has become very, very fraught. The question is, what are the real world applications of that, right? I mean, is this an example of the things that can happen in the real world when you have ultimately a spat between the two men and a spat between the United States and Canada over trade? This is the president's approach to the world broadly, which is that he feels that whether someone has been an ally in the past or not, ultimately that trade trumps pretty much everything else. In the president's view, American workers have been getting the short end of those deals for a generation or more, and he wants to fix all that. Consequences be damned. Other presidents have taken a different approach. This president saying ultimately he wants to side with workers and manufacturers inside the United States, and then we'll see how all those ripple effects play out over time.
Eamon, I want to go back to the tweet about Iran and the fact the sanctions hit reimposed overnight. As you mentioned, clearly it ruffles some diplomatic feathers. How does it poll those? Now that they're actually getting put back in place, those sanctions, does that poll pretty well coming into the midterms and other special votes?
It's a good question. I haven't seen actual poll numbers on that, but I would imagine that it would poll relatively well. Look, Iran's not popular in the United States. The president's taking a strong hand here in dealing with it. I would imagine it definitely plays well up on Capitol Hill, where Republicans will look at that and say, this is the president fulfilling a campaign promise. The president said he was going to take a tougher stand on Iran. He said that the Iran nuclear deal signed in 2015 under the Obama administration was one of the worst deals of all time. So naturally, he's going to rip it up and put those sanctions back in place. The question is whether this will bring the Iranians to the table, or it will push the Iranian regime to further extremes. You know, that's a decision that's going to have a lot to play in terms of Iranian domestic political power balances, and we just don't know enough, I don't think, about how the Iranians make decisions to be able to forecast accurately what they're going to do as a result of this.